Hello there, learners! I'm Teacher Jang and welcome to Module 7. Today, we'll dive into the exciting world of planning and managing developmentally sequenced teaching and learning processes. Buckle up because we're about to unlock the secrets to creating amazing classroom experiences. So first, let's have the overview. In this module, we'll explore key concepts like identifying crucial elements in planning, managing, and executing developmentally appropriate lessons. We'll get familiar with curriculum requirements and learn how to anchor our teaching approaches to diverse classroom contexts. From mastering the daily lesson log template, or the DLL, to implementing effective procedures, we'll equip you with the tools to ensure top-notch teaching and learning in your classrooms. But remember, careful planning and management are the cornerstones of quality education. And together, we'll conquer that both. To fully grasp the purpose of this module and your role as an effective planner, manager, and implementer of developmentally sequenced lessons, let's unveil some key concepts. Then, let's get ready to become curriculum architects, learning engineers, and classroom conductors. So the first key concept is curriculum areas. When we say curriculum areas, these are the different subjects you learn in school, like math, science, or language arts. They form the foundation of your education and guide the content you'll teach and students will learn. Each area has its own learning objectives and specific teaching approaches, and understanding them is crucial for crafting effective lessons.
Next, we have developmentally sequenced teaching and learning processes. These refer to the order of activities that keeps learners engaged in the content of purposely scaffolds learners towards achieving the lesson's objectives by maximizing allotted class time. The third one is instructional planning. This refers to the process of systematically preparing, developing, evaluating, and managing the instructional process by using principles of teaching and learning. The next one is teaching or learning contexts. These refer to the teaching or learning situations and all the circumstances in which learners learn from instructions. The other illustrations of practice, the curriculum guide or CG, as mentioned before, should dictate the competencies and standards of learning to be set in a given lesson of teaching, learning, encounter. It is a must that the teacher review or familiarize himself or herself with how the curriculum works to meet teaching and learning requirements. As you plan, manage, and implement developmentally sequenced lessons, the use of the curriculum guide or the CG, the teacher's guide, the TG, and the learner's materials or the LM would make teachers adhere to the requirements of the learning areas and the curriculum at large. The teacher should not be afraid of modifying or changing what has been planned in terms of instruction. Versatility in effectively delivering lessons requires teachers to be sensitive to their learners' needs during the fulfillment of teaching and learning processes. Remember that the learners will not have the same practice or levels of learning. For as long as the changes would still meet the objective set, then this should not be considered as a deviation from the actual lesson, but rather, it should be seen as a form of shaping a lesson based on a given teaching context. Be careful with observing the minor but still important details in planning, management, and implementation of lessons. For instance, the time allotted for the learning area should be strictly followed, or else it will create a ripple of problems in terms of budgeting time to develop necessary competencies. Also, the use of other references or materials to supplement learning should be within the scope of the curriculum and must be carefully screened or reviewed in consonance with the characteristics and learning contexts experienced by Filipino learners in the classroom.
Hello everyone, I am Janelle and this is my part of the session. So the next is DLL, which means daily lesson plan. So the importance of DLL is the roadmap for teachers, ensuring focused instruction, effective content delivery, and optimal learning outcomes for students. So they provide clarity, organization, and flexibility, helping teachers optimize classroom time and cater to individual students' needs. So the first one is the objective. Objectives are specific statements describing what students should know or be able to do by the end of the lesson. It provides a clear target for both teachers and students, and it helps to ensure that learning is intentional and focused. So, content standard is a statement that describes the specific knowledge and skills students and expected to learn in the lessons, and also it provides a clear reference point for both teachers and students, ensuring that the lesson focuses on the most important learning objectives within a particular subject area and grade level. So performance standards alongside learning competencies guide assessment and ultimately support effective learning in your lessons. So next is learning competencies, are statements that describe what your students are expected to know, understand, and be able to do by the end of the lesson. They represent the specific learning goals you want your students to achieve through the lesson activities and content. Second is the content. So the content is mythological story. The title is The Corrigan's Head by Anne Terry. So third is learning resources, learners, materials, and multimedia presentation. So there are the references. Number one to four is the references of the topic or the discussion. So number four is the procedure of the discussion. So B and other learning resource. A is so after to proceed the discussion, teacher will review previous lesson or presenting new lesson. So they review the life of discriminated woman through a song. So letter B establishing a purpose for the lesson and ask learners the connection of Mullen's life to the concept of discrimination. So letter C is presenting examples. So instances of the lesson. This part the teacher may present example of their lesson so that the learners can get more idea about their lesson. So letter D, discussing new concept and practicing new skills. There are skills number one, and also letter E is practicing new skills number two. There are different pages. So after the discussion, the additional activities. So additional activities for application or remediation first learners. So the example activities is have learners identify famous oral literary pieces and share them before the class.
And now, I am going to start my discussion. As you can see in my laptop screen, this is the example of a lesson plan or a content standard for a lesson plan. For example, here, given the content or given the lesson about the literature, of course, you also have to start from the objectives. Under the objectives, it should have a content standard. What is content standard? Content standard is what the learner must achieve right after you discuss your content. What the learner must comprehend, what the learner must learn after you are delivering your content standard. Performance standard is or what are the performance needed by the learner to perform in order to pass your topic or to your subject. Next is the learning competency or objectives. When we say learning competency, what are the competencies that is needed for the learner? Next is the content. For example, the content here is mythological story about the Gorgon's Head by Anne Terry. Next is the learning resources. What is under learning resources? Learning resources are these are the learning materials that you are going to use when you are discussing. For example, if you are going to present something, of course you need a laptop, a projector, a or if you have any activities, you may use cartolina or um, whiteboards, those small whiteboards, or even charts. And that is the learning materials. What are the needed materials during your discussion? Next is procedures. Procedures is how you are going to conduct your discussion. This will have a abstract, a activity, that aligns with your discussion. Under this is learning resources, reviewing previous lessons, or presenting new lessons, which includes the recapitulation and, of course, asking your students what they know about your discussion for today's discussion. Next is presenting examples, instances of new lessons. Because for instance, let us say that your students doesn't know what the word you were talking about. For example, let me give you an example. Methodology or mythological. Myth and mythological is different from one another. So you have to explain, you have to give examples for the different two words, two terms, so that your learner can comprehend or can know what is or what are the difference between the two and how do they distinct from one another. Next is discussing new concepts and practicing new skills. Next, discussing new concepts and practicing new skills. And the last one is additional activities for application or remediation. So in the last part, when we say additional activities, of course, given for instance that you give activities during your discussion, of course, there is a additional activity for us to know, teachers, that the students really understand what you are talking about in front. And of course, this is to test the knowledge, of course, from your students. This is the test that you are going to say to yourself as a teacher that your students did understand something during your discussion. As a teacher, of course, in the teaching process, we are not always perfect for what we are teaching to our students, for the teaching strategy that we used, and for the teaching process during our lecture to our learners. And of course, with that, we must be open for improvements. In here in my screen, this is the sum of the recommending um, improvements so that a teacher could be more efficient and effective during the discussion. First is scaffolding is everything. When we say scaffolding is everything, of course we have to know that our learners have different attitudes, different behaviors when it comes in a classroom setting. And a teacher, and if the teacher observes that the student is, we must always remember that as a teacher, it is not easy to teach different students, different learners. And of course, in a classroom setting, there are different kinds of behaviors and attitudes that a teacher must observe to his or her students. And when it comes to learning or teaching, of course, a teacher is not always perfect. So a teacher, as a pre-service teacher or as a teacher in a field, we must be open to recommendations in order for us to become more efficient and effective when it comes to teaching. First is scaffolding is everything. When we say scaffolding, this is the method of teaching wherein you as a teacher, you are helping your learner to achieve higher order thinking skills and to achieve more success. For example, your learner is a bit slow of a learner. Of course, you as a teacher, you must use teaching strategy. If you are teaching math, if I am a math teacher and there are a lot of my most or majority of my learners cannot, when we say cannot have or cannot learn directly from what I have just discussed, of course, I must think of a way in order for them to climb the up a ladder and to comprehend what I am saying in front of them. So I must give examples, I must give differentiated assessment. Next, keep learning activities contextualized. Of course, as a teacher, you must be transparent to your students so that your learners can also have a track of their records of their scores. Next, focus attention on the objective. Of course, in your lesson plan, you should incorporate your lesson plan, your objective, to your content standards. What needs to be attained in the content standards needs also to be attained in the objective. What needs to be in the objectives can be achieved at the end of your discussion or during your discussion. So as a teacher, we must always use tactics, and we must always remember that when we discuss, when we are delivering, trying to communicate with our learners, we must always remember the objectives of our lesson plan. Last but not least, assessment is a must. Why is it need that at the end of the discussion or during the discussion there should be an assessment? This is to catch the interest of your learners. Second, This is to test the understanding level or the knowledge level of your learners. And third, this is to test and to observe also that during your discussion, you are becoming an effective teacher. And if not, of course, there should be an adjustment. You should know, or you could know where you could adjust the next time you could have your lesson with them. Because at the three, in the last, or let's say for example, you didn't attain, like half of your class failed. Of course, you must, as a teacher, you can think of a way that at my next discussion, I can replay what I have discussed this to them so that they could comprehend more, and I should widen my mind and trying to connect with them. So there is an attitude. There is also what we call as new learning strategy during your discussion. Planning is everything, yes. The planning aspect of teaching is very important that it alone can determine the failure or success of a teacher. However, it is the weekly lesson plan and the specific day-to-day task of planning the instruction that are most lacking in teachers' educational preparation. And of course, the bigger challenge is to take the lesson or the embedded activities more developmental. As a proficient teachers, we are driven to design lessons that satisfies the need to make teaching and learning process seamless and progressive for our learners. We start by familiarizing ourselves with the content of the curriculum as the Bible from which we refer in planning our lesson. Of course, as a teacher, it is very important that before you discuss your lesson, no matter how high your content knowledge is, you must have to review it. And make sure that when you are delivering your lesson, you yourself as a teacher is ready to expand your knowledge, to expand what you have known from your lesson to your students. Because I believe that it is fun and also it is more important that you deepen the knowledge of your learners, not just like shallow, but just deepen their knowledge. Because as what I have said, it is really satisfying to see that your students or your learners really has the interest to connect with you as a teacher and really has the interest in your lesson, in your subjects, because you are showing connection with them. And upon showing connection with your um, learners, of course, there is what we call give and take lesson. You give questions to them, they answer your questions correctly. And they question you, you give them the answers correctly. You can learn from them, we can learn also from them. So it is just a give and take process. If a teacher, no matter how high the content knowledge is really prepared for his or her lesson. So, for the first illustration of practice, we will be breezing through the procedures set in the DLL to have a better grasp of how to plan for developmentally sequenced teaching and learning processes. So I hope, guys, that you've learned something and you've comprehended something during our recorded video lesson. Again, this is Teacher Dayan, your teacher for the day. Bye!